the intentions and the realities behind the two-state solution.
There is no realistic way of implementing a two-state solution.
Why some say it is no longer
Hear, hear.
possible, as others say it's necessary. The National breaks down the stories shaping our world.
It's not possible because you can't just walk back a genocide. You can't just walk back 75 fucking years of terrorism against an occupied people. And they will always use the thing where they say, like, well, they reject the two-state solution. And it's like, yeah, that rejection doesn't happen in a vacuum. They have every right to say, no, we're not. Why would we concede to you? Why would we concede anything to you? We're going, like, you know, there's only one solution. Intifada revolution.
Next. Now it's time to dig deeper into the news shaping our world. Hard facts on a long-held dream of peace, a two-state solution. Most UN member states do call Palestine a state, but the US, UK, and Canada do not, even though they share that two-state goal.
How do they share the two-state goal? No, they don't. Also, what do Israel, the UK, America, and Canada all share? Oh yeah, they're all colonial settler states. Well, they've all, you know, the UK is not themselves, but they've all done settler colonialism. So it seems that maybe the precedent set by recognizing Palestine would then undermine their own statehood. Gee.
Ellen Morrow breaks down why all that support still hasn't made the dream come true.
The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is at its worst point in years. And so world leaders are calling for an idea that's been around for decades.
We need to renew our resolve to pursue this two-state solution.
We must never lose sight of how essential the two-state solution is.
Side by side, two states.
A two-state solution.
Two-state solution.
The two-state solution means the creation of an independent Palestinian state that would coexist alongside Israel.
It's long been seen as the best hope for peace, but it's never really come close.
The thing is that Palestine already was an independent state. Israel is the rogue state that, like, see, right fucking there, the framing is wrong. Palestine is an independent state. It was before the fucking UN was.
Close to happening. And the reality on the ground now, after the October 7th Hamas attacks and Israel's military offensive into Gaza, may make it more difficult than ever before.
So is the two-state solution actually a viable option or just a talking point? Here's some of what makes it so difficult.
One of the first big challenges is, what would the borders of a Palestinian state even look like?
To understand why that's so hard, we have to go back.
It is not hard. Go back to 1967, exactly like Hamas is asking. Go back to 1948, when Israel didn't even exist. Notice how they're not, like, notice the maps out of focus. Like, they literally can't even show it because the historical geography is so blatant. Like, oh, well, what's this thing on the West Bank? Like, why are you a country that's, like, not actually fully a country, and you just have all these weird settlements, like, in occupied territory? What's that about?
Back in history, but this is not a full account.
We're going to take you through some of the pivotal moments in this long contested history. After the horrors of the Holocaust, the United Nations voted to establish the State of Israel as a refuge for the Jewish people in their ancestral homeland. A decision
Israel existed before this. They actually forget to mention that.
That angered the majority Arab population.
The majority Palestine.
Plan was to divide historic Palestine, the land
wasn't historic Palestine. It was a state as of fucking the early 20th century.
between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, which had been under British control, into two states.
Under British control as an independent territory of Palestine. Like, this is such an intellectually dishonest fucking news report.
One for Jews, one for Arabs, with Jerusalem under international control. Jewish leaders declared the establishment of Israel on May 14, 1948. But 5 surrounding Arab nations rejected the UN plan and attacked Israel, the start of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. The creation of Israel and the war.
Notice how they don't mention the Nakba and the forced displacement of almost 1 million people. Notice how that's not mentioned. Notice that's how yada about, just glossed over.
Upended life for the Arab population in what Palestinians call the Nakba, or catastrophe.
This is the thing, right? They said that was because of the war. No, not because of the war. It's because of the fucking occupation, because of the partition plan, not because of that blue. Who lived in that blue before they decided that the blue was going to go to Israel? Palestinians. But you see how they frame this in the way that because of the conflict, that is what caused the Nakba. That's not what caused the Nakba.
750,000 people fled or were expelled from their homes.
They were expelled. They didn't flee the war. They were expelled. End of conversation.
Becoming refugees across the Middle East and in what's now the West Bank and Gaza. Today, some 5.9 million UN-registered Palestinian refugees claim links to that displacement. At the end of the war in 1949, Israel controlled more land than it had under the UN plan. Jordan took the West Bank, Egypt took Gaza. Jerusalem was divided, with Israeli control in the west and Arab control in the east.
Until
these armistice lines became known as the Green Line, still the internationally recognized boundaries between Israel and the Palestinian territories today. The Green Line is also known as the pre-1967 line because things changed in the Six-Day War between Israel and its Arab neighbors.
I was saying, thank you for telling me I was muted. I was saying this. They don't mention what happened here, what that is, why that little blue spot. They just brush over that, not a big deal. I think that they might get to it right here, though. It's 67.
The Green Line is also known as the pre-1967 line because things changed in the Six-Day War between Israel and its Arab neighbors that year. Israel won, going past the Green Line. To this day, it has full control of Gaza and the West Bank.
They committed fucking terrorism and stole land. That's like saying Canada won against the indigenous. It's like that's a similar context. Israel won. This is like
Bank, including East Jerusalem, the Palestinian territories under a decades-long Israeli military occupation.
Yes, and they celebrate it to this day. That is what the Walk with Israel is. It is to commemorate the stealing of East Jerusalem from Palestine. They walk with Israel from West Jerusalem to East Jerusalem. They do it every year in Toronto. It is literally a celebration of a colonial genocidal occupation. That is what the Walk with Israel is. It's always on the end of May, or like May 30th. It is a celebration of the stealing of East Jerusalem. And it's like Canada Day. It's the exact same thing. It's a celebration of a settler colonial occupation, Jerusalem Day.
So, for Palestinians, the Green Line is the starting point for any negotiations on the borders of a Palestinian state.
Because they want the Israeli military out, ending conditions that some rights groups have condemned as apartheid for denying Palestinians equal rights.
Occupation is a daily reality of violence. Every aspect of your life is controlled by a foreign country. When and how
Noor Oda is an author and activist in the West Bank, where
See, the thing about this is that no matter how much truth that they put into these news reports, if it's ever put into the balanced perspective as the blatant fucking admissions and lies of the Israel perspective, it's never been done objectively or fairly, right? Like, you can't present a bunch of like intellectually dishonest arguments and then suddenly platform the truth and be like, oh, we said both sides. You know, it's like, no, you're lying on behalf of Israel, and then you're giving like a fair and objective platform to the Palestinians, but you're not questioning being honest about the admissions of 67 or 48, or the fact that Palestine existed before Israel, before the Holocaust, and it wasn't historical. It was its own place. Like, psychological damage. The news, so much of it.
3 million Palestinians live under strict Israeli restrictions and surveillance.
whether I can travel from one city to another for work or to visit family is up to an Israeli soldier at a checkpoint. You could be subject to detention, and you have no recourse for justice.
But for Israel, the Green Line is a non-starter.
Israel points out the Green Line was never meant as an official border, but an armistice line.
And it says it poses a danger to its security, arguing the Green Line makes the country too narrow in places to defend.
Maybe you shouldn't be doing settler colonialism. Like, fuck the Green Line. You see how now it's become a conversation with the Green Line. It's becoming a conversation about the two-state solution. It's becoming a conversation about maybe they can both exist, when it should be, no, you shouldn't even be there to begin with. Tel Aviv, Haifa, all of that. You know, you can live there, but you're not in control, and you don't get to do apartheid, right? Like, that's the thing, is that it's always framed when we say you shouldn't even be there, that it suddenly then means that, oh, there's going to be a genocide that's going to happen to the Israelis. When it's like, what happened for the longest time from, like, you know, the 19th century prior? What were the Jews doing then there? Because they were there, but they lived under Arab control. And I don't think many of them were against it. I think it was this agreement where it's like, hey, you know, we understand that you've been here a little bit longer and more recent, so like, we'd like to be here too, but like, we're not going to try to tell you that this is our land and you can't be here. But it would be in our best interest together for us to just share this like really holy place. Like, if you go to this place, like the place where the Mount Sinai, if you go to Mount Sinai, where Mount Sinai is, the actual historical Mount Sinai, what is there is a mosque. There isn't, because also Mount Sinai is in Egypt, right? It's in an Arab area. And so, like, the thing about this is they always try to make it as if, like, it is this Jewish supremacy, as if these areas, these holy sites, were not, what made them so holy is that they were shared between two groups of people, right? And the problem is, and this is why it's so key, for everything, because what would happen if we had these two very diverse groups of people coming together and saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't be fighting. Maybe we could all just like figure this out rightfully, which doesn't just mean the two-state solution. It means giving it back to Palestinians to then say, we're not going to kick you out, but this fucking apartheid ends now. And maybe we're going to be in control and have self-determination. And if you want to be here, you're welcome to be here, but you have to not do apartheid and not have, this is the key thing, military arms. If they demilitarized Israel, right, what would that do? That would set the stage for like a legitimate communal like statehood between, you know, non-Jewish supremacist Israelis and Arabs. And I'm pretty sure that would create what like the reason why Stalin signed on for it is because he thought it would create like a socialist utopia. And now, based on all of what has happened, like if Palestine gets free, you think they're going to do capitalism? Or do you think they're going to do, you know, what their culture brings them to do? And that's, you know, this crazy collectivist, like, you know, the most collectivist, the most like, you know, the most just they're unmovable, right? They're just an unmovable, communal, collectivist, deeply religious, deeply collectivist, spiritually, you know, it's the same thing about like the Indonesians, and there's a reason why genocides happen to certain amounts of very large groups of people who have the ability to have large, you know, big populations with very, you know, with stern belief systems. Because what is that? That is a threat, because it's this collectivist mindset. This is why Hamas is in power, not the PLO, because the PLO was secular. They were fucking socialist, you know? No, and that's the thing. Yeah, people did not. It's the same with like Afghanistan. If we want to look at through our eyes, we say, oh, it's, you know, they're living in squalor. And it's like, that's the thing about why it is a holy land, is because it is a shared land between diverse people. And there is a complex history where they allow, you know, where it's like, yeah, we probably shouldn't be cool with each other, but we're going to just be cool with each other. And that existed for 2,000 years up until the fucking 1870s when the Zionists showed up. You know, well, that's actually not true. Sorry, that, well, to a degree it is true. Because, you know, there were the Crusades and all that. But peace kept emerging, you know? Peace kept emerging. And it's like almost as if they needed to make sure that that peace didn't emerge while, you know, there was a rising of like communist forces after World War II. And if you go back and look at Israel after World War II, if you go back and look at like all of the main political figures in Israel, they were all pro-labor Jews from Europe who moved to like, who moved their like pro-worker ideology to like, you know, that collectivist like Jewish statehood that they had with the kibbutzes and all of that. It was a socialist state, and that's why the left signed on. That's why Stalin was the first one to say, yeah, this is a good idea, because what it was supposed to be and what it has now become have become two different things. And the reason that they can't go back from it is because then they'll do what it was supposed to be, but with both groups, not just with Palestinians and not just with Jews, because they're not going to kick them out. You know, the Palestinians aren't Maoists, right? They just want their territory to have their control over the territory. Sorry, I've gone way too long here, but yeah, when they talk about October 7th, I'm going to have a meltdown.
Its security fears heightened after Hamas militants stormed into Israel on October 7th.
armies of terror, if you wish, the Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, the Houthis, they're all basically attacking Israel militarily. This is an unbearable situation for Israel. It's an unbearable situation for any state in the world.
You're an occupying force. What do you think's going to happen? It's like saying, like Normandy, the Nazis have the right to defend themselves. Like, you're an occupying force in a foreign territory. This is what occurs.
Israel also doesn't consider the West Bank an occupied territory, but a disputed one.
How? How do they? They're doing settlements. If it was disputed, you wouldn't be actively. There's corporations who exist on occupied territory. If it was disputed, they wouldn't be doing that. They wouldn't be saying, "Oh, this is actually ours." That's not what places who have disputes over territory do. You know? Do you think like in I won't even use that example, but you don't do that. You don't just do settlements on disputed territory, right? Like, is South Korea doing settlements in North Korea? No.
Israeli officials call it by its biblical name, Judea and Samaria, home of the ancient Jewish heartland.
That's freaks. That's a freak thing. That's Jewish supremacy. That's saying your land actually doesn't exist. Because then that's to say that what came after that, what came about, 800 years after that, pretty sure another person showed up and that land changed, because land is not static. People change, people move, things happen.
So there's a fundamental disagreement on what the borders should look like, and that creates a lot of other challenges to the two-state solution.
This is like the two-state solution for a 2-year-old Zionist.
Are one of them. Jewish settlements supported by Israel all across the occupied West Bank.
It's funny because they keep mentioning almost everything that I mentioned, but after the fact and in this backwards-ass framing.
Closed-off communities where more than 500,000 Jewish settlers now live, built on land internationally.
See, and then they just did as anti-Semitism right there. They could have said Israeli settlers, but they had to say Jewish settlers because now they're using Jewish people as a shield. They're Israeli settlers.
Recognized as Palestinian. The West Bank is seen as the heart of any would-be Palestinian state, but this map shows you just how much of that land the settlements are taking up.
It's effectively rendered the West Bank as a patchwork of non-contiguous territories. So I think logistically speaking...
But the green line, it makes their territory too thin, even though they're occupying the other territory that the green line separates them from.
There is no realistic way of implementing a two-state solution.
The settlements are considered illegal under international law, but Israel denies they're a violation, approving and funding settlement development over decades. Settlers say they have a religious right to the land.
What is pushing us is thousands of years of history of longing to this land.
I guarantee you that dude is American. And like, to say you have thousands of years of history, so do they. So do they.
But for many Palestinians...
And the craziest thing about that is, too, before they were Muslim, those same people that were in that territory were Jewish, and then they converted. They're the same people, and they're not white-skinned, Like, just the absurdity of all of this. That dude is clearly American. He had, like, an American accent. He said he had thousands of years of history connected to the land. This is neocolonial freakism.
The settlements have meant forced displacement, a loss of resources, even violence. With some extremist settlers targeting and intimidating Palestinians in sometimes deadly attacks.
الحرب اللي تغير صار يجي على البيوت علينا، ما كان يجي على البيوت. صار يجي على البيوت يهاجم الناس البيوت.
Extremist settler violence carried out with impunity, settlement expansion, all make it harder, not easier, for Israel to achieve lasting peace.
And then there's the
Oh, you're such a noble guy, Blinken, for pointing that out.
issue of occupied East Jerusalem. A
bitterly contested. No, it was stolen. And that's the thing, is they glossed over that on the way through this. The fact that it was stolen in a military operation, and that they celebrate the stealing of it to this day. And now oh, let's also go the highly contentious territory of East Jerusalem.
contested place, home to holy sites for Jews, Muslims, and Christians.
If people can acknowledge that all sides have legitimate claims, whether they're national or religious, then there might be hope.
Instead, Jerusalem has often been the scene of violent confrontations, and many of them have happened here. To Jews, this is Temple Mount, where ancient Jewish temples once stood. Just outside is the Western Wall, a sacred prayer site, the holiest place in Judaism. To Muslims, this same place is called the Noble Sanctuary, home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, where Muslims believe the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. Palestinians see East Jerusalem as the capital of any future Palestinian state. It's considered part of the occupied West Bank under international law. But Israel claims all of Jerusalem.
Wait, what did it just say?
Under international law. It's considered part of the occupied West Bank under international law.
Of Palestine. See, they didn't say it's the way that they leave out that is not of Israel, because she didn't say of Palestine. She said it is recognized as part of the occupied territory. That just creates the gray area where it's it's Palestinian territory. It's recognized as occupied territory, it's just Palestine. That's all it is. It's Palestine. They're arguing about 2 layers of map changes, and that it's recognized under international law. The 48 lines aren't recognized by international law.
But Israel claims all of Jerusalem as its unified and eternal capital.
Jerusalem has been the capital of the Jewish people for the past 3,000 years.
Yes, and some of those people decided, hey, I don't think we want to do this anymore. We should probably do this other thing that this other cool guy has been talking about. We're going to do that for a while. They leave that part out.
There have been settlement disputes in East Jerusalem too, and battles over land that have displaced Palestinian families.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
No.
With settlers filing lawsuits for land they say belonged to Jews before the 1948 war. Palestinians say it's all part of an effort to push them out of the holy city.
Jerusalem's future necessarily requires sharing as opposed to the dominance of one group. That is a recipe for continued violence.
So a two-state solution would require some kind of agreement on the status of Jerusalem, and that has been a major hurdle in the failed peace talks of the past.
Up next, how the peace process came crashing down and what it means for the two-state solution today.
When we've seen these repeated failures time and again, you have total, not just distrust, but even despair.
The current leaders of Israel and the Palestinians are among the obstacles to a two-state solution. Ellen Morrow shows us how things got to this point.
She just said that the Palestinians... Okay.
state solution. Leaders of Israel and the Palestinians are among the obstacles.
The Palestinians are among the obstacles. The Palestinians are among the obstacles. The Palestinians are among the obstacles.
To a two-state solution. Ellen Morrow shows us how things got to this point.
Another day of protest and violence on the West Bank.
In 1987, Palestinian anger over decades of occupation triggered the first Intifada, or uprising. It started out with protests and boycotts before turning violent. The Israeli military cracked down. More than 1,000 Palestinians and 160 Israelis were killed. But as the violence was going on, something extraordinary happened.
The two sides started secret talks, leading to what seemed like a big breakthrough.
The signing of the first Oslo Accord in 1993.
Today, the formal end of the long blood feud between Israelis and Palestinians.
A moment when hopes for peace and a Palestinian state were high. Yasser Arafat's Palestine Liberation Organization recognized Israel's right to exist in peace. Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin agreed to the creation of the Palestinian Authority to run parts of the West Bank and Gaza.
That was unimaginable just less than a year before.
As Israel's deputy foreign minister at the time, Yossi Beilin helped start those secret negotiations.
But on the other hand, I was very worried. The picture which I saw was a picture of a peace treaty signed by two enemies. Well, this was not the case.
That's because Oslo didn't actually solve tough issues like Jerusalem or what would happen with Palestinian refugees. All that was supposed to be worked out later, but it never was. And attacks from extremists on both sides made everything harder.
The prime minister with a vision for peace, dead.
Rabin was assassinated by a far-right Israeli student. And Hamas, founded in the first Intifada, launched a wave of suicide bombings in Israel. In 2000, Arafat and then Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak tried to salvage things, but they got nowhere.
When we've seen these repeated failures time and again, you have total, not just distrust, but even despair.
Frustration over the failed peace process set the stage for this, the even deadlier Second Intifada.
Once again, Israelis and Palestinians fought in the West Bank and Gaza Strip.
Suicide bombings and attacks targeted Israelis. Israel deployed military force against Palestinians. 3,200 Palestinians and 1,000 Israelis were killed. The Second Intifada put the conflict on an even darker path, making many feel...
Every time that they've said the casualty numbers, it's been increasingly exponential Palestinians.
Peace was impossible. Israel, shaken by the attacks, built a separation wall, added more checkpoints.
Shaken by the attacks. This is so fucking absurd. Shaken by the attacks on their colonial occupation.
More restrictions on Palestinian movement.
I love how much they just talk out of both sides of their mouth. Like, they will openly say that Israel is a settler colonial state, but then say that type of shit, like, shaken by the attacks.
So the failure of the peace process brought hopes crashing
It should be in their cowardly reaction.
down, pushing the two sides even further apart. And that's reflected in their leaders today. Leaders who experts say pose another hurdle to a two-state solution.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu came to office for the first time in 1996 as a critic of the Oslo Accords. While at times Netanyahu has expressed support for the two-state solution, he's also repeatedly argued against it, saying it would endanger Israel's security.
It will not give us peace, it will bring terror closer. ואני אכן גאה על כך שמנעתי את הקמתה של מדינה פלסטינית.
Netanyahu's latest government is also considered the most ultranationalist in Israeli history.
Hard cut there.
Also considered the most ultranationalist in Israeli history.
The audio is cut, like something was said there. She probably said Zionist, or maybe, I don't know, but you can tell that the audio was cut there. Like there's a clipping there.
Latest government is also considered the most ultranationalist in Israeli history. A fragile coalition propped up by far-right cabinet ministers, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, both settlers in the occupied West Bank who deny the existence of Palestinians as a people. On the Palestinian side, you have...
Yeah, I'm a freak, and I can tell stuff like that. I know when things are edited.
Have two rival factions. There's Hamas, designated a terrorist group by Canada and other countries, and Fatah, the political party of Yasser Arafat that runs the Palestinian Authority. In 2006, Hamas beat Fatah in elections held in Gaza just months after Israel withdrew from the territory. Then in 2007,
because Hamas was backed by Israel,
there was a brief civil war. Hamas violently pushing Fatah out of Gaza entirely, taking full control and running Gaza ever since. Israel then tightened restrictions, imposing a total land, sea, and air blockade upheld in part by Egypt. Some rights groups say it turned Gaza into an open-air prison, but Israel says it's necessary, with Hamas rejecting Israel's right to exist and vowing more attacks like October 7th.
What about Israel rejecting Palestine's right to exist?
الدولة لا مقام لها على أرضنا. إحنا الدولة لابد أن نزيلها.
I know the world is very upset of what Israel is doing in Gaza, but what do you expect from a democratic country? How should a democratic country can protect its own people? As long as Hamas is in power.
You're not a democratic country. You're a settler colonial, fascistic, colonizer state. Like, democratic society.
It's a complete disaster.
But to Palestinians who support it, Hamas is a legitimate resistance movement against the occupation, one becoming more popular in
any means necessary.
In the West Bank, where rival Fatah is based.
There is a lot of raw pain right now. People will side with whoever is seen to be punching back.
Fatah is led by Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. The Palestinian Authority is backed by the international community, and Abbas says he supports the two-state solution.
But that's not considering... I mean, who wouldn't?
وبالتالي ليأتوا إلى طاولة المفاوضات أيدينا دائما ممدودة للمفاوضات.
But to many, the Palestinian Authority is too weak, and Abbas himself has been criticized as autocratic, in charge since 2005. Polls suggest more than 80% of Palestinians want him to resign.
With the right leadership, you'd have a chance of managing, if not resolving, most if not all of the challenges. You need leaders on both sides who are masters of their political houses, not prisoners of their ideologies. You do not have them.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that both sides, well, no, not both sides, sorry. The problem is that one side is destined to eradicate the other. So the other, the Palestinians, will only see resistance as a violent exercise, because why should they come to a diplomatic agreement if they're being treated like their right to exist, isn't a thing, And this all doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? There's 75 years of this. The casualties are not equal. So it's hard to have somebody who comes in as a pragmatic worker to try to resolve this without one of them either saying, oh, but you don't exist, or the other one saying, you're going to pay for everything that you've done to us. it's the hardest thing to get to. But that's why it needs to be done with people who are not influenced by the military-industrial complex like fucking Netanyahu is, or by, you know, this power struggle towards, like, you know, authority, like with the Palestinian Authority, who is just like another, basically just a arm of the Zionist occupation, but just with like lipstick on.
So there are so many very difficult and deeply rooted challenges to the two-state solution.
Still, some find ways to hold on to hope that somehow all this suffering will end.
Even at such a tragic crisis.
Images of the IDF carrying their soldiers, it's like...
New opportunities are created.
I'm a Palestinian. We don't have the luxury of not having hope.
It won't take too long before people will get back to their senses.
In the end, Palestinians will have a chance to be free. Whether I see it or not, I hope I'm that lucky, but I don't know.
Hear, hear.
So, Ellen, we know what the leaders say. We know what the challenges are, but can you give us a sense of what people on the ground are saying?
Well, there's opinion polling, Adrian, from after the war broke out. In one poll, 65% of Israelis said they don't want a two-state solution. Now, that's a near complete reversal from where the numbers were a decade ago. In a Palestinian...
It's almost as if that was part of it.
Poll, 74% of people said they want a Palestinian state across the entire land. And those sentiments...
Not they want, they are a state across the entire land. That's the thing, not a want. They want to be recognized as the state that they are. Two different things. The spin in the framework of this is just incredible.
...are yet another challenge to the two-state solution.
All right.
Like, you can't just teach someone to do this. They really need to believe it. That's why they need to get these people who are so detached from their reality, because they actually believe this stuff. And so they're not really like, it's not that they've been trained to do this, like, dishonest framing. It's how they see it, you know? Those are the ones who get put into places to say, like, oh, this one's got a real delusional understanding of the conflict. Let's get them on fucking TV.
All right, Ellen Morrow, thank you for this.
You're welcome.